Hey guys, so we're going to do another quick experiment with our slider controls and with our expressions and how we can link our expressions together. We can modify our expressions as they're linked together with different things here. So let's take a look over here at our new composition, and I'm going to make it 1920 by 1080, 24 frames a second, and I'll make this about 15 seconds in length. Okay, the background color I'll keep black just so I know that it's nothing and that if I were to export this it would be a black screen. Just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to find a palette from Coolors and just have it there just so I don't have to do a lot of guesswork. And let's see if we can't make this look a little well composed, style it somewhat nicely. So let's add a new solid. And just up to you whether or not you want to make the background dark with everything else on it light, or vice versa. I'll make mine light with everything on it darker. And we'll start off with some text. So let's get some text here, and let's see if we can. I'm going to put in this. We're going to talk about the wiggle expression. The wiggle expression, and we're going to be using our sort of adjustments, our sliders to control them. Okay, so let me just get this text colored correctly. And let's a real quick experiment with the wiggle expression for now. Here, I'm just going to create an ellipse or a square. It's up to you. It's any kind of old shape. I'll make this center the anchor point. Remember, Control Alt and Home is how you center the anchor point. And I'll make this a different color here. Like say, for instance, this pink color. All right, then I'll center this into the artboard vertically, maybe a little bit lower. Okay, all right, so let's P for position, and let's hold down the Alt key. And remember, wiggle has two arguments that you pass in there, two parameters. The first one is the frequency, and the second one is the amplitude, right? So frequency and amplitude. Frequency is how many times per second you're going to make this change, and then amplitude is how much of a change you're going to make, right? And so with the position, you're basically changing both the X and Y coordinates, and in this case, I'm changing it 5 pixels every 5 seconds. So it's going to move 5 pixels in some random direction every 5 seconds. So you can kind of see how that looks, right? It's hard to see anything happening here, so I'm going to make that maybe, for instance, like 50 pixels. So you can kind of see that moving around a lot. And then over here, I'm going to make this, say, for instance, like from 5 to 10, and you can see it's moving around a lot more frenetically. And if, say, for instance, I had it moving like more often, but like less so, it would just look like it's sort of like vibrating, and then so on and so forth, right? So just keep those wherever you want them for now. And so let's set this board up. Let's set up our sliders ahead of time. So I'm going to make a new rectangle. And I'm going to make a thin rectangle, and I'm just going to center the anchor point there, and I'll make it the same color as my text. And then I'm going to get my text tool here, and on write frequency, make sure this is the same color, and I'll shrink this down some. We can align these maybe to the left here, and then we'll duplicate both of these, drag them both down. And I'll change this one to, oops, amplitude. All right, so we have these little sliders here. All right, so we can leave those where they're at, and we can come back to those later. Maybe for now what we can do is we can sort of center everything just to make it look like maybe have this circle line up with the center of these guys here. And again, I'm just going to make sure they're all lined up to the left. Okay, so let's make a circle, I'll make a small circle, and I'm going to make it to where it's just about covering this bar here, this little rectangle I made. I'll change the color to something unique, maybe this green color here. And I'll just select this rectangle here. Let's make sure we have the anchor point centered, and then hold down Shift and select a little rectangle, and so make sure this align layers to selection is selected, and let's align these vertically. And then I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to duplicate this, Control D, and I'll just pull this straight down. Once again, align these vertically. Okay, so let's see if we can't pull these together. Okay, so frequency is going to be on the top, right? So whichever one's on the top. Let's have this one, this right here, shape layer 4. We'll pull that upwards, and we'll press Enter and rename this one frequency slider. Okay, and then press Enter over here, and we'll say amplitude slider. All right, so we're going to have these two move, and as they move, they're going to change the frequency or the amplitude. So let's maybe think of some sort of parameters, some sort of like, minimum and maximum values here. So I think maybe the minimum value of our frequency should be 5, and our maximum should be maybe 24, because we don't want it to be more than 1 frame per second. We don't want it to be less than a frame. So we're going to kind of like, keep that in mind, right? So with that said, we'll pull, so this right here, 24. We'll figure it out later. Same with amplitude. We don't want it to get too crazy because after a while we'll be missing some things. It'll just be sort of teleporting. We won't have any actual motion. But we'll get into that in a second. All right, so let's see. How are we going to connect our wiggle values, since we have 2 values, to the different things? Now, an easy way of doing this would be just to simply link these together with our frequency slider, but I think there's an actual more accurate way of doing this. I'm going to call this one circle. Right. A more accurate way of doing this, if I click on my circle and I go over here to Effect and I find Expression Controls, I actually find a slider control. And with the slider control, I can actually, maybe rename this and call this one Frequency Slider. And with that done, I can actually select my first number, because remember the first number is your frequency, and I can just drag this over here to the slider itself. Now you'll notice here the slider is set to 0, so if I were to say, for instance, like, play this, you can see I could pull the slider up, and then it would start to move more rapidly as I went up. So in this case, 24 frames a second. So I think this is probably about, like, after this, it starts to, like, you really can't see a difference between 24 and the rest. But you can see a difference between, like, 12 and 24. All right, I can pull this back down to 0 and it stops. All right, so with amplitude, the same thing. I just need to make another frequency. I just need to make another slider here. Okay, so my slider. Let's go over here to, once again, circle. Let's actually go to Effect. Let's find something different. Instead of doing a slider control, let's make another expression control. Let's make it an angle control. And again, I'm just going to grab, highlight this little 10 here, drag this little pick whip over here to the angle, and then right now it's set to 0. I'll just pull this over to maybe say, for instance, like 5 or so. And then I'll play this, nothing happens, but I'll move this angle up a little bit, and now it's starting to move some more, right? So now it's moving 26. So the angle is 26, right? And then same thing here, right? Okay. Okay, so let's think about this, how we're going to make these guys here work to control the different sliders. So in order to do that, we want to make sure we're able to access these little expression controls. So let's find over here under Effects. We have our frequency slider and we have our angle control, right? Both of these have little pick whips. So if I were to click on P for position, and I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to separate dimensions and just sort of isolate my X position here. So same thing here. So frequency, here's our frequency slider, here's our slider. Let's just drag it over here to our X position. right? So already it's set to 194, right? Because our x position is 194. So if I open up my little options down here, once again, I can take my x position and I can subtract 194 from that value, which will reset it to 0. So now if I go over here to my x position of my frequency slider here, once I start playing this, if I just move this forward, it starts to move, right? But notice this, because I can move this, because 100, so 24 pixels, so like let's see what happens here. I'm going to go from this side to this side, to the very, very end. All right, let's make this 24, right? It's moving so fast that we can't even see it, right? So let's do some math here. I'm gonna stop this, right? Well, you know, it's stopped moving, obviously, here. But it's moving, there's no difference between 614 and, wait, not 24, but like 194 plus 24. There really is no difference between these two, 218. Okay, so if I were to say, for instance, let's say get 194, let's do some math here. Let's go over here to our calculator, and let's do 614 minus 194. Okay, that's 420, and then we're going to divide that by 24, I think. Right, 17 point. Let's see what happens here. If I were to say, for instance, do x position minus 194 divided by 18. Okay, that causes a problem here. I see. Open and close this. Okay. I wonder if. What if I did this whole thing from the beginning to the end? Let's divide that by 18. No. Let's take this away. Okay, here we go. So now, okay, 194 should be 0. And then this should be 24. Yep. There it is. So here we go. I set to 0 right now, right? Okay, cool. All right, so it's at the 0. And then I can move this up, and it moves faster. And then it moves even faster, and this is the fastest it'll go up here to the very, very top, right? So it actually will be a visible difference between these two here in terms of the frequency and the speed. Okay, so let's take a look at this one more time here. All right, we're going to surround this entire expression here with parentheses and divide the whole thing by 18, just based off of my thing. Now, obviously, yours is going to be a little bit different because you use a different, maybe your rectangle was not quite as big. Maybe it didn't quite occur maybe you didn't land it at the same spot. So I'm going to keep that in mind later here. And so we can start over here with this amplitude slider here. Let's open up this in terms of its position. So P for position, right click on it, and let's separate the dimensions. And once again, we're going to make sure we have isolated the X position. And then going over here for our angle control, let's move this frequency slider, let's collapse that down. And then we'll just grab over here to our X position. The angle, I'm going to attach this to the X position of our thing here. All right, so once again, let's open this up and let's subtract 194. Okay, so right now it's 0. And if I were to say, for instance, play this and like move this amplitude slider over, okay, so it's moving 272 pixels. This actually seems okay. Because if we were to like move this over to the side, and then once we started moving our frequency here as well, it starts to go kind of crazy. And then we can kind of move these back and forth. Okay, so let's do this. Let's pull these both back at 194, and let's just make a series of keyframes that will allow us to see how this thing moves. So let's start off with our X position here. I'm just going to press U on the keyboard just to dismiss everything except for these keyframes here. And I'm going to have them go like maybe every half second. I'll have it. I'll have them move up a little bit. So I'm just going to move this up to, like, say for instance, I'll just add like 5 to this. And then I'll do the same thing on here. I'll just add 5 to this. And so we can kind of see them like just inch forward a little bit. Actually, I'll add. So what's 18 times 5? I'll add 90 to this. So, all right. And maybe like move this forward a little bit too. Okay. And then we'll play that for a few seconds, and then maybe we'll like increase the amplitude some. So like put the little keyframe here, and then move this forward maybe half a second or a second or so. Yeah, half a second. And I'll move this forward a little bit more. So let's see the difference here. All right, and then maybe we can wait a second here, and we'll add another keyframe, and we'll move this forward maybe even more. The frequency, have it catch up. All right, so now it's moving further, and now it's moving faster. Oh my gosh. All right, let's actually move these a little further away. Give it a little more time. And then maybe we can even have have this last a few seconds here, and then maybe we can have this go down some, maybe. Back down to where it was before. Right, so we can have this like it's spinning, it's going, and then it, whoa, and then it slows down. It's just kind of vibrating in place, and then maybe the frequency goes up as far as it'll go. 614, I think we said. Right, and maybe even like we can have this move not quite so much, just a little bit further, like a little bit further out. We can have this go like a little bit further out, like that. Oops. Go forward half a second. A little further out. Oh, that's going nuts. And then lastly, we'll have the frequency go down to like a good deal, and we'll have the amplitude go up a good deal. And we'll have the amplitude start maybe around the same time while it's moving. Okay, so let's see what happens here. So hopefully you can kind of see like the difference, in what these, what the wiggle expression does. Like you can kind of see the purpose behind it. So it's moving randomly around, and you're controlling different things. So this is a good visualization. Oh no, there's the bell. All right, well here we go. Put your name on this somewhere and export it as I did before, and I can't wait to see you guys produce. See you guys in class.